Has hip-hop as an art form abandoned its poetic roots? Join us as we examine the reappearing line between poetry and hip-hop, next on Views and Vibes.
In 1990, in Severn, Maryland, the daughter of a clergyman was discovered by a music industry insider while pumping gas at a service station. The odds of her getting signed and spending 11 weeks at #1 on the U.S. singles charts? 1 in 19 million. The odds of this former church choir singer going on to sell 40 million records? 1 in 15 million. The odds of the same woman winning 6 Grammy Awards and starring in 2 Broadway plays? 1 in 75 million. The odds of this musician and performer having a child diagnosed with autism? 1 in 110. I'm Toni Braxton, and I encourage you to learn the signs of autism at autismspeaks.org. Early diagnosis can make a lifetime of difference.
When hip-hop began to emerge as a dominant presence in American culture, its poetic elements were always brought into the discussion, often to help legitimize it as a true art form. Today, though, poetry and hip-hop rarely share the same space within any examination, much less a discussion. Joining us today to talk about the absence of poetry in hip-hop are founding member of the group, the PoemCs, Mr. Patrick Washington, rapper, actress, and so much more. And welcome back welcoming you back to Views and Vibes, the Princess of Controversy, and poet and playwright, Mr. John Johnson. Welcome you guys to Views and Vibes, and like I said, Princess, welcome to have you. I'm glad to have you back here.
Thank you.
Let's get into this discussion, because people complain about, how hip-hop has fallen, particularly the lyricism behind hip-hop has fallen so much in the past decade or so, or even the past 20 years. What happened to hip-hop and poetry being this brotherhood? Where did it go?
I would say that first, the lyricism is still alive and well in hip-hop. Okay. All right, first and foremost.
But where is it? Because we don't get to see it.
That's the point. We don't get to see it.
Okay.
There is a machine, that is so much more powerful than, the independent artists right now. And it's rolling very, strong, and it'll roll over. It'll steamroll over all of us, and all we get to hear are, the easy to swallow pieces, the real simplistic, rhymes, just the ones that appeal to the base nature of, people,
So is this machine trying to dumb down lyricism? Do they not want people to think? I mean, why are they actually, like you said, steamrolling over artists like that?
I think that it's been replaced, the poetic aspect of it has been replaced with products like Coca-Cola, Reebok, Nike,
right.
Every liquor available on the shelf, so I mean, it's not really, I don't necessarily think it's dumbing it down. It's just trying to get people to become ultimate consumers, and they're using the art form to do so.
And I think that I think what has changed is that, if you think about poets and music and where like the whole origin came from, when it started, there was a different reason for why people did it. It was a way of communicating. It was a way of escape. It was a way of talking about things that were suppressed. So I think that the era that we live in now, music, the reason why we're losing a lot of the lyricism in terms of not being able to see it on a daily basis is because of the fact that people are no longer just doing music because to get free. You know what I mean? And people are doing they're doing it as their job, as a business. So when you add that element to anything that you're doing, it changes the shape of the trueness of why it even started in the first place.
But when you talk about the base of hip hop, a lot of people will argue that it didn't start off very poetic. It was you're in the parties, you're just getting up on a microphone, you're trying to get people amped up. You're right, it was communication. And your simple little limericks, little nursery rhymes, but wasn't very poetic. Now the poetry aspect of it began to filter in later on. When did that begin to change? When did that, that whole part of poetry leaving the art form, when did that start to leave?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, poetry, hip-hop did begin with the party, like you said, you know what I mean? And that's the best part of hip hop. But times change, and the good thing about hip hop is it changes with the times. And there was a time when black pride and militancy and that sort of thing was needed and needed to be heard, and sure enough that was the dominant voice in hip hop. Various things happen,
Right.
And as we respond to the world around us, hip hop is a very I don't want to say reactionary type art form. Whatever happens, we make do with what's going on, and we'll respond thusly. So. What was I saying? But that is what hip hop does. Well, poetry was always there before hip hop anyway.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, it always existed as its own art form.
Right.
The blending of the two happened or did it actually ever happen? For some people, they would say that they never saw the poetry in hip hop. That was just an excuse to try to legitimize hip hop, to say, well, it's a new brand of poetry. But for some people would say that it never was very poetic.
I don't think I would agree with that, because I think that if you think about, like, if you look at like some of the documentaries, like The Freshest Kids, or like
Right.
but I mean before, like when they were saying like the MC actually emerged, I mean there were a lot of people who talked about that hip hop was one of those things that was in the parks, and people were like, well, I want to one up on you, but it was always in fun. It was
Right.
always it was a safer way to battle with your mind versus your
Battle with
fist.
fist, right.
So that is poetic, because when you're in a crowd and you're snapping your fingers and you're trying to think about something off the top of your head that's going to be smooth and smarter than the next person, like that ultimately is poetic, because you're having to use your mind to think quickly about a rhyme. So I don't think it was ever absent.
Okay.
Yeah.
But okay.
No, I know Tupac had he always talked about he used to write poetry all the time. And he just found that actually putting it to a beat allowed people to listen to him. So I think that poetry was always around. Hip hop was more just of a younger, popular vibe and a movement that people wanted to join and be a part of. In addition to that, when you talked about lyrics, I just think that that competitive spirit amongst MCs made people step up their lyrical game, made people try to become more innovative in how they describe their world, how they describe their conditions. And again, I think those conditions have been brought out by corporations.
There were certain touchstones, in hip hop that changed the game lyrically, and ushered in the poetic,
But when was that?
Well, I can say a couple. All right, the first one was, I guess, to a certain degree, The Message, right? When Grandmaster Melly Mel, and Flash did The Message.
Right.
Not only was it just lyrically dense, but it was. It spoke the social, injustice. Okay, so that's one. The other one was Rakim. I mean, for real,
Right.
When Rock came out, people were flipped. What? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Did you just say what I think you just said? And then after him, it was Nas. You know what I mean? There were certain moments, in hip hop, that lyrically the game stepped up, and you saw it was poetry again.
Right.
And it made everybody else, wake up a little bit.
Right. Right.
So.
But now when you look at it, like we said, the whole idea of this conversation is how poetry has begun to escape hip hop. When did that transition start to happen? Was it right after Nas? Was like Nas the pinnacle, and all of a sudden they're like, well, we can't do any better, so let's dumb it all down from here? I mean, what?
No, I think, I watched, Abio Doom from The Last Poets, and he spoke about how he never got credit for the lyric that Biggie wrote about party and BS. And he said that I think what happened, and you see it happen even in DC right now, there used to be this melting pot of like rappers, singers, everybody that would come to like Bar None or different places like that. And then what happened was, see, poetry took off in a different way. Like it took off. Like you got the Def Poetry Jam and all of that.
Right.
So it was like then it became, it's like a separating thing. Like, okay, we're becoming our own entity. So I don't know. I think that people didn't know that poetry was going to get that big, maybe.
Right.
And then
when we come back from the break, I want to touch on that point. Did that poetry and stuff like that, where you actually were on, did that help to separate the two? So we got to take a quick break. We'll be right back with more Views and Vibes.